Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another We Need to Talk. So, what do we need to talk about today? Well, I would like to talk about the end of this unnatural world. Because I feel like I can taste it. Something's changing. We are getting to the end of a cycle, and it's palpable. I keep having all of these insights and kind of remembrances of the natural way of life. So I want to talk about that today. What is the natural way of life? What would life look like if none of this was in the way? Not, like, if we fix the government, if we got better leaders, that's not going to happen within this construct. I'm talking about something deeper. What if we removed the entire energetic overlay, because that's what's happening, that's what we are doing through our being and through our awakening. We are removing this entire energetic overlay, the construct, the machine, the veil, whatever you want to call it, the inverted AI-generated matrix that we have been living inside. What if that went away, because it is going away, and we got to experience what is actually natural to us, humans. Now, for a long time, I had resistance to this idea that we're living in a simulation. Scientists are saying, they can prove that we're living in a simulation. And I think my resistance to it was that I didn't want the assumption to be like, that's all that life is, just a simulation, because I don't agree with that at all. But in a certain sense, we have been living in a simulation, because we've been living in an AI-generated construct overlaid over reality with a capital R. And that's what I'm feeling. I'm beginning to sense what's underneath the overlay, what's underneath the construct, and always has been, without which no construct could ever even possibly exist, because it has to be over something. So we've inherited so many lies, you guys. Oh my goodness. A foundational inversion that we have been living in. We were born into it. We were born into a world where scarcity was assumed, where struggle was expected, and suffering called virtue. And, if you ever tried to push back against that, you would get a lot of people telling you that's just the way things are. You can't expect anything different. That is how complete the mind control has been. This assumption that most people have, you were born to go to school, to get a job, to pay for your life. You need to pay for your life. And this is presented as just how it is. It's just the human condition. But is it? I'm going to say no. It has been our condition, and it's been what we were conditioned to. But that is not the natural way of life. That is not why we are here. That is not why we were born. This condition of living inside a parasitical construct that has normalized extraction to the point where most people believe that's just what life is, and they will fight to defend that point of view and justify their own imprisonment within it. So, the construct, and I get it, and I'm not disparaging anybody here, but, the construct doesn't just take our time, our labor, our money. It takes our life force. And in order to take our life force, in order to constantly extract from us, it had to create belief systems in us that make that okay, that make that just a part of life, right? It takes our life force. It takes our attention. It takes our creative energy, our time, our health. And it's done that for so long that we've stopped noticing, and we've normalized it, and we've adapted to it because we're amazing, because human beings are amazing. Team human. So this scarcity mindset overall is not a human trait. It is an installed program, and it's time for us to grow out of this now. It's time for us to reach into ourselves for the truth. Okay? Because as long as we keep reinforcing the old program, like, oh, well, that's just how it is, and how can you be sure, and all of that. Well, this is being born through us, is being born through our awakening. And I just, last few days, I've been coming back to a moment from many years ago, from the 90s, when and I think you might recognize this feeling, even if your version of it looks a little bit different. But when I came out of Juilliard and began my life as an actor, I entered a kind of purgatory with no, I just didn't have a framework for, like, how do I structure my time? What happens? I didn't go to a job. I mean, I worked. As soon as I got out of school, I went into a job, but it was the theater job, and then I went to another theater job. And in between jobs, the days would stretch out, and I had no structure, no experience really, like living day to day without being in school or without having something to do all the time. And I knew I was doing what I was meant to be doing at that time, and I had a gift, and expressing that gift felt as natural as breathing to me. And yet the infrastructure of life itself, the paying for it, the justifying it, the making it work inside a world that had very specific ideas, of what constitutes real work, was a constant grinding struggle. I would take these low commitment jobs like waiting tables. I worked in a flower shop for years, on and off, because of the flexibility, whatever I could get that would let me drop everything for an audition, or switch shifts with somebody else, or go away for a job, And in between these, when it was quiet, when there was nothing happening, I would sometimes just go sit in the coffee shop. And sometimes I could be there for hours. I'd have a book, but I wasn't really reading. I was just there, not out of laziness, but more a kind of avoidance of my inner landscape, a kind of overwhelm that I couldn't really name, a sense of dread. And underneath the dread was this something that was even harder to articulate, which I can only name as incomprehension. Incomprehension. Why is this so hard? Why? I'm doing something that comes naturally. I'm expressing what I was made to express. Why does it feel like the ground isn't even there? Now, admittedly, I had lost my father tragically a couple of years before. I was definitely, I had lost my sense of grounding, but it was more than that. I didn't have words for what I was feeling. I just had the feeling. And when I was in my first marriage, I told my husband that if he knew that I'd spent the morning at the coffee shop, like reading and sitting and trying to find my footing, the reaction could be swift and aggressive. He's a wonderful person, wasn't his fault. It was just the way he was brought up, you're not working, you're not being responsible. Things aren't just going to happen magically. Who do you think you are? I felt I was entitled to not throw myself into the absolute grind of desperate working for money at every moment in order to make my contribution. And I had no answer for that because I had no framework. And what I know now is that he was not entirely wrong. I'm certainly not. I did have a wound around helplessness and, being provided for, learned helplessness, dependency, that had nothing to do with my intelligence or my talent. It was a real wound, and I don't dismiss that. But here's what I also know now. That wound was tangled up with something else, and something much older and much larger than my personal psychology. Because underneath that neurosis, underneath the fear, there was this knowing, a kind of pure knowing that was quiet and stubborn and persistent, a knowing that said, this isn't right. This isn't natural. We weren't made for this. Not someone will come and save me, but the world itself is supposed to work differently than this. I felt like I knew that somewhere deep. Life is supposed to hold us differently than this. Why isn't it working? Right? And I was not awake enough at the time to understand what that knowing was pointing. Okay, I think we're back. Sorry, guys. My internet is just terrible these days. Like every day there's an interruption, I get knocked offline. So I think what I was saying was, the space that I was in back then and my inability to articulate what was going on inside me was interpreted by him and also by me, frankly, as entitlement and immaturity and magical thinking. And actually, it was none of those things. It was a kind of pure remembrance. And it's only now that I remember back to that feeling, and it feels like what I know now. Over the years, I moved through different frameworks, trying to make sense of life, trying to make sense of me. And, I eventually went into coaching, life coaching, health coaching, spiritual coaching, deep, intense study of yoga, over the years, I stopped seeing myself as a victim. I learned about universal principles of abundance, and, that was genuinely liberating. But it also put everything back on me, right? And so there's this idea in New Age circles and sometimes in the coaching world, like, if you can't create what you want, you must be doing something wrong internally. And I would create things or wonder why I wasn't able to create something, and then when I was able to create something, and sometimes something big, then I wished I hadn't, because the cost was so high. So it felt like I haven't quite figured this out. What was missing was the construct, because here's what none of those frameworks told me. The deck is actually stacked. It is actually. Okay, we're back. Sorry, thanks for your patience, guys. Okay, what was I saying? Yeah, the deck is stacked, and you have to understand that, okay? Because if you don't understand that, then you don't know what board you're playing on, okay? And we and this earth have been the crown jewel in an extraction system whose origins go far beyond what most people are willing to consider yet. And yet everything. Okay, so what I started realizing was, like, everything that I help people with in life coaching, and a lot of the principles that we teach in coaching, like manifestation, conscious manifestation, and all of that, it's like we have to learn how to do that because of the level of interference with our natural connection to source that would just naturally flow, right, and provide everything that is needed. So we have to acknowledge that there's been something very fishy going on here, okay? And that is not a reason to collapse into victimhood. Quite the contrary. It is a reason to be in awe of the human spirit and everything that we have accomplished. And that feeling I used to have sitting in the coffee shop with that wordless dread and that incomprehension, I understand it very differently now. It was not immaturity. It was like the purity of soul in me, still partially veiled and still tangled up, admittedly, in all of the dysfunction, that the overlay produces in us personally. And yet, remembering through all of that confusion something true, something real, right? And noticing that something was wrong with the world, not just with her, with me. That knowing was real, and it was just ahead of the understanding of it. So, and now the understanding is catching up. That's what it feels like to me. So here's what I keep coming back to. Look at the natural world. Look at nature. This is not nature as we've been taught to see it, the brutal survival contest. Of course, it's been framed that way. Now we're understanding, wait, actually nature is very cooperative, and trees are communicating with each other. Animals can help each other. I mean, there's these stories every day about how the natural world is in alliance with itself, right? So, of course, it's been framed as, survival of the fittest. And I'm not saying that that doesn't exist. Of course it does, but nature, as it actually is, most of the time, a rose does not strain to be beautiful. It doesn't work to share its fragrance. It just happens naturally. It simply is what it is, effortlessly, completely. This is one of the things that I learned from all of the hours I spent working at Rooster Flowers in New York City, observing the flowers. And a tree does not clock in to work. A river doesn't apply for a permit to flow. A bird does not pay for its nest. All of this is just happening, right? Every living thing in the natural world is given exactly what it needs to express its nature fully. Not as a reward for something, not as the result of an effort, but as the natural order of life itself. So why not us? Well, that's the way it's supposed to be. That is the way it's supposed to be for us too. Animals don't have jobs. They don't have mortgages. There is no debt in nature. There is circulation and give and return, reciprocity and cycles. Yes, there is predation. There is death, but there's no extraction without return. That's a big difference. No system designed to harvest endlessly while giving nothing back. That is the overlay that does that. Nature itself does not do that. It naturally balances itself, right? And every time people get in there and try to mess with it, we throw off the balance that's already there. And that's what makes the control matrix so unnatural. Even interference with nature, like weather manipulation, all these chemtrails, GMO crops, the depleted soil, everything that we're experiencing and living underneath right now mirrors that same pattern, which is a consciousness that takes and doesn't give. Right? It gives the bare minimum to sustain life so that it can continue to predate, to feed on the source of life, okay? Why are humans so interfered with? I've been talking about this for a while. We've got to connect the dots, or we're never going to understand how all of this is interrelated. Of all the life on this planet, aside from the planet herself, we are the most controlled, the most programmed, the most siphoned, and the reason is obvious when you see it. It's because we have the greatest potential energy, right? We are the full universal fractal of the source itself. So, if a rose radiates beauty, but a human being, a sovereign fractal of source with direct connection to the creative intelligence of the universe, is capable of something that the parasitical construct cannot replicate. They can't generate on their own. That is the genuine life force, the light, the soul, S-O-L, the inner sun, right? That's our generator. That's our infinite source. That's our 0 point. And we have that by virtue of our source connection. So even when it is diverted, even when it's extracted, overlaid, hampered, it's still there, right? And why all of those interferences? Well, because that's what's being fed on. At the heart of the issue if you pardon the pun. That's what is being fed upon. Our light is being fed upon. And it also translates to our labor, our work, our money, our creativity, our spirit, right? That is what is being harvested, not just our labor, our light. And we've got to come to terms with the fact that that is what is happening. And if you understand that, it simplifies everything. It explains the chaos. It puts order into what you're seeing. When you realize that, okay, this is not about this side and that side. It's not about black or white. It is not about politics. It is not about governments. It is not about any of the things that they want you to think it's about, with their 3 tools that they always use over and over, which is distraction, divide and conquer, and problem, reaction, solution. Those are the 3 tools that they always use over and over and over again. And you got to stop falling for it. Don't fall for it anymore. This is how they've been getting us, right? They want our light. That's what they have been extracting for millions of years. And so the programming in us runs very deep, because the moment we remember what we are, the whole game changes, right? That's what's happening now. This is what the awakening is. This is what the revelation is, the disclosure. Okay, we can talk about the Epstein files and how that's connected to the trafficking networks, which is, the child and human trafficking is a funding mechanism, right? The eugenics agenda, the transhumanist project, right? These are all expressions of the same thing, which is this consciousness that cannot generate life, so it has to consume it, and it has to control its food source, right? And then we've got the UFO disclosures happening, and that is related to free energy, exotic technology, 0-point energy, the role of different extraterrestrial races and how long they have been in touch with governments and their agreements with governments for extraction of the population and the earth. The exchanges of technology that were kept out of the public domain, the ones that could have benefited the whole human race, kept quiet, kept secret, and used for profit. I mean, all of these things are related to one another, okay? And that's why we can't be silent about these things. We can't let them just kind of, oh, well, okay, whatever, let it go. You can't let it go. Because we have to stay on top of it, because if we don't, that's interpreted as our consent to whatever it is that they want to do next, okay? This awakening is happening through us. It's happening through us. It is not being visited upon us by some other power. Nobody is the savior out there. Okay, there's no government leader, no religious leader, no, AI God from above that is going to save us, do the work for us. That is not happening. That is not how it's going to happen. It happens in you. You have the connection. You have the inner sun. You have a portal to source within you. And that is how it's going to happen. The more we wake up, the clearer that we see why the suppression has been so total. Free 0-point energy, our lost history, our natural healing abilities, our higher gifts, all suppressed for the same reason. So what would natural provision actually feel like? Oh, well, I can't stop thinking about this. I can't stop feeling into it. I can't stop living there in my heart, because I've always had a connection to that realm. In the universe, outside of what we could call the incursion zone, right? The parts of this reality that have been invaded, we're not the only place here, right? But outside the reach of this control matrix, which is multidimensional and spans large areas of the multiverse, I guess we could say, this is how life works. You receive what you need effortlessly through your alignment, not as charity, not as a reward for good behavior or for worship, as the natural flow of life toward life. That's how it works. The way that the sunlight just falls on everyone. The way that water runs downhill. The way that you breathe and your breath comes without you asking for it. That is the natural way of life. And what it means in practice for us is that we have creative flow. It's not something that we have to force or earn. It's just our nature expressing itself in the way that a spring bubbles up through the earth, right? It means we have access to our inspiration, our inner knowing as a birthright, right? Our birthright, not the special gift of a few awesome people. No, everybody has this. All real humans have this. It's the natural signal of being in connection with Source. That's what it is, right? And from that comes your unique contribution. Your perfectly unique to you contribution that nobody else can make but you, right? Your note in the symphony of the universe, the one song, the gift that only you can carry. That's why there's no comparison. There's no this hierarchy. Someone's better than somebody else. Somebody's more important than somebody else. No, it's your unique contribution which is required. And it's not because you worked hard enough to deserve it, but because you are it. The rose does not earn its fragrance. It's just being the rose that it is. And then our material needs, yes, of course. Our material needs are provided for in that natural way of life. And for a time here, because things have been so screwy, money is a transitional phase. But even now, as we move through this transition, the question is, what do I need to do my work in the world, right? Not how do I survive? What do I need to do my work in the world? Those are such different questions. One of them comes from connection, and the other one comes from scarcity programming. Do you really want that to be your thought that's guiding you through your life? What I need to survive? You're so much more than that. And I think this is where we can touch on the depths of the trauma that humanity has been through. And I want to hold this with real tenderness because we've all been through it in our own way. And I know that it looks like some people have a much bigger share of that burden that we've all carried. But that's what we see right now. We have all had our ups and downs in this system. We have all been through everything you could possibly imagine. And we remember it. Our DNA remembers it, and our cells, our body remembers it. Okay? The reason that it feels so hard to believe that everything is going to be okay, that everything is okay, that things really are changing, even for people who are well along the path of awakening, is because the trauma runs so deep. We're not talking about a few generations of scarcity programming. We are talking about millions of years of human civilization, reset after reset, the loss of other planets that we've also been on, the planets blowing up and shit like that, and resets and losing our memory and invasion and different systems coming in and adding their special sauce in the control matrix. We're talking about something that has shaped human civilization, literally our DNA and our psyche for a very, very long time. This is what we are waking up to, and it's not a problem. But we've got to acknowledge the grief. That's what I did. My podcast that came out on Friday is a solo podcast where I talk about that and how it's communicated to us through fairy tales, like what we've been through. The grief of living inside someone else's world. Right? Being the slave in your own home. This is the reality that we've been living, that all human beings have been living for so long. trying to succeed inside a system that was never designed for you to thrive, feeling broken when you couldn't fit in or make it work, internalizing the failure. You know what I'm talking about. We've all done this. That's how it was designed and set up. But we are still so much more than that. We don't have to play that game. And, you know, the deepest wound may be like forgetting that there was ever any other way. Most people don't even question it, right? School, job, pay for life. That's what humans do. That's just what we do. That's what we have to do. Well, life is hard. That's our duty. Understandable why so many people feel that way. But we gotta move away from that now. We've got to move beyond that now. You know, the fact that you're listening to this and something in you says, yes, that feels right. If that's how you're feeling, that's the remembrance of your own soul, right? That is the soul surfacing through the conditioning. And that is amazing. That's what happens. The trauma is real. The grief is real. And we need to be willing to feel it, not bypass it. We've got to acknowledge it so that the new earth timelines can reorganize around our consciousness, our awareness of the past, of what we've been through. Even if, and we're not, you know, Katie Bishop says this, and I think it's so, such an important point that she makes. She's like, not talking about memories, like I remember this, I remember that, like you have to remember all of your 8.4 million other incarnations before this one. No, it's remembrance. Remembrance doesn't mean that it doesn't mean you remember every single specific thing that has ever happened to you, but it's a feeling, a knowing, the remembrance of your journey. And yes, along the way, you do start to get recall of specific things or specific feelings, knowings about what you've been through, right? So the natural way is already returning. And I want to ground everything that I've said in the now. Okay? Here is what I feel is true. This is not a distant dream. This is already re-emerging, and it is re-emerging through us. Through us. And as the ancient control structures fall apart, as disclosure accelerates, as the Epstein files continue to, you know, trickle through and crack open the trafficking world, as the survivors continue to come forward with their courage and tell what happened to them, as we receive, you know, information about the networks that have funded the Matrix, and as the governments can no longer contain what's coming about ET presence and secret space programs and suppressed technology and all of that stuff, you can start to connect the dots and see how it has all been working together for a very, 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 very long time. Not so that you can be horrified at the awfulness of everything and think, well, I don't want to live in this world anymore. No, the whole point is the veil is thinning. That is why we are knowing this now. This is why we are remembering this now. This is why the information is coming out now, because the veil is thinning, because the cycle is drawing to an end, and that's it. No more. It's done this time. Where we're moving to, and where we are in the photon belt, all of the other factors about our place in the galaxy and the cosmos, and everything is part of this dance of the cycles converging all at once and coming to an end. This is it. It's happening. And as the veil thins, things get crazy. Oh, they get crazy, because the ones who have been feeding off of us and our light with this lack of connection to source and the lack of true creativity, they only know how to repeat the same pattern over and over again. So they can't accept what's happening. So they keep just trying what they've always done again and again and again in a kind of desperate, it's like, it's like we do sometimes. You're like, you keep pushing the same button, even though it's not working. but you're like, whoo, 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 you just get like, damn it. And then you start pushing it harder and you're like, why won't it work? Right. That's kind of what they're doing. Right. And it's getting ugly, but it's nothing to be afraid of. This is when we need to like gird our loins, so to speak, and, step up. Right. The natural is reasserting itself now. All right. And it's reasserting itself through us, through every person who is remembering, who is refusing to consent to the dark agendas, who is trusting their source connection, who is opening up to, well, what am I really here for? And maybe I could open up to that and step into that. How can I contribute to this time of transition, right? In a balanced, regulated way, okay? The earth is remembering, the sun is recalibrating, and we are being called not to build something from scratch, but to return to what always was and trust that that is going to come up underneath us and that is going to carry us forward. That's what's happening. So on the practical level, look, we don't need to wait for the full collapse of the matrix to begin living this, right? It's just who you are. It's part of who you are. So we can start with one question, which is, what wants to flow through me? What wants to flow through me? A few, I don't know, however many weeks it was back, time is so strange, but I wrote about this in my blog, and I wrote a podcast episode about it, which was about wealth. Like, wealth is so much more than, wealth is the feeling of fullness that you have from your connection to source, where you know that there's a 0 point within you through which infinity trickles into the material world, right? And our work is to open to that, right? To trust it and to open to that, like allowing that abundance, allowing more life to flow through us, allowing more of you to come through you, not like squeezing that out of fear. And it's totally understandable that we did that, right? But like, now is the time to open that up. What wants to flow through me? Because there's something. There's a reason why you're here. There's no accident. You are wanted. You are needed. What wants to flow through you? Not, what do I owe? Not, what do I need to produce to justify my existence? I mean, the difference in those energies is, you can feel it, right? It's, what is my nature? What is my fragrance? What is going to emanate from me just naturally if I allow it? If I had no concern about taking care of myself financially and all of that, if I had no worries like that, what would just flow through me naturally? What would I be doing? And you can just do a little bit. Yes, even if you still have to work, even if you have other things that you're doing to just make ends meet right now, it's okay. Just hang in there. We're going to get there. But start doing one thing. Start making something real with a capital R, from that feeling of what wants to flow through me. If I were being 100% myself, what would I spend a part of my day involved with? Maybe it's just walking through nature. Maybe it's swimming in a river, It could be anything, because it's as unique as you. So what is the specific form that life wants to take through me? And that's the question of the natural world. And it's available to all of us at any time. So again, on the practical level, just notice where you're still operating from scarcity, right? When those thoughts come in like, notice that without judgment. Just notice. That's the old programming. That's not you. That's not real, that programming. Okay, that was inserted, that was conditioned into us. That's not the way of life. And everybody outside of the incursion zone knows that. All right? We can let that go. Begin to distinguish survival mode, or distinguish between the choices you make in survival mode and the choices that you make from your soul, the soul level choosing, because they feel completely different. Recognize that your gifts and your creative flow and your capacity for love and connection are not luxuries. They are absolutely essential, right? They are part of your nature. They are what you are here to express. And you don't have to apologize for that. Or like, just try to find 5 minutes for that to be okay. No, that is who we are. Your gifts, your whatever wants to flow through you, right? So, let's all remember that struggle was never our destiny. That is not the natural way. I am holding the space for all of us to feel even briefly what it is to be a living being in this living universe and given everything that we need to be everything that we are. Because that is where we're going. And if we can feel it, imagine it into being through ourselves, it happens that much more readily. Okay, the rose is not asking for permission to bloom. And you don't have to do that either. And what is natural to you cannot be permanently suppressed. So step up and step out, because it's time. And we're all remembering. Great time to be alive. Thanks for your presence here today. Thanks for your willingness to stay open to what's real and what's natural. Don't take my word for it. Only you can feel this through you. And I hope that what I've talked about today has inspired that recognition of the resonance of truth in you. All right. Thanks for your patience with me getting kicked offline so many times too. Love you guys.